What's up, mate? I'm Elliot, and welcome to Love Labs. Why do some men get chosen, even when they're not the loudest, the richest, or the best-looking guy in the room? You've probably watched it happen. A guy who shouldn't have her on paper somehow has her attention completely. So here are 10 specific things that move a woman from interested in you to actually choosing you over everyone else. This isn't theory. It's grounded in attachment research, attraction psychology, and the patterns that show up in long-term relationship studies. Become the calmest person in her life. When she's overwhelmed, what does her nervous system actually get from being near you? Think about it for a second. She vents to you about her boss after a brutal week, and you don't catastrophize alongside her. Her friend group is going through some loud, dramatic spiral, and you don't add fuel to it. She gets a stressful text in the middle of dinner, and your face stays neutral while she figures out what she wants to do. That's not being detached. That's being regulated. There's a concept called co-regulation, the idea that two nervous systems sync to each other, and one of them ends up either pulling the other toward calm or pulling it toward chaos. Research on adult attachment suggests that long-term partners function as biological anchors for each other. Verify work by Sparrow and Hazen around 2008, showing that people in stable bonds literally borrow each other's regulation. So when you stay steady while everything around her isn't, you become something rare the place she goes to come down. Now you might be thinking, isn't this just suppressing emotion and pretending nothing affects you? It's not. Suppression is silence with tension underneath. Regulation is feeling something fully and not letting it run the room. She can tell the difference, even if she can't name it. The man who panics with her is one more variable. The man who stays grounded becomes the constant. Stop competing and start standing apart. When other men come up in her life, do you sound threatened or do you sound completely unbothered? This is a small thing that runs deep. She mentions a male coworker and you don't probe. You don't get a tight little look on your face. You just stay curious about her day. An ex comes up in conversation and you don't get cold or distant because the past doesn't actually threaten you. Some guy slides into her direct messages and you don't perform jealousy as a way of asking for reassurance. Here's the psychology underneath it. The moment you position yourself against another man, you've placed yourself in a category one of many. You've told her there's a comparison happening, and now she has to evaluate you on the same axis as everyone else. But the man who doesn't compete, who simply is who he is, doesn't sit on that scale at all. He's not better than the other options. He's a different category entirely. That distinction matters more than people realize. Comparison is how you become replaceable. Distinctness is how you become specific, and specific is what gets chosen. You're not pretending the other men don't exist. You're just not arranging your behavior around them. Make her feel seen, not just wanted. When you talk about her, do you describe her body or do you describe her mind? Most men get this backward and never know why she eventually drifted. You bring up something she mentioned offhand 3 weeks ago, a podcast she liked, a thing her sister said that bothered her. You ask about the project she was nervous about before her presentation, the one she didn't think you were paying attention to. You remember the name of her childhood dog because she told you once, and it mattered to her. That's specific noticing, and it activates something in her completely separate from desire. Being wanted is loud, being seen is quiet, and it builds something underneath the surface that lasts longer than attraction. You might push back here and say, isn't this just being a good listener? It's a piece of it, but it's bigger than that. Listening is a skill. Noticing is an orientation. It means you actually find her interesting in a granular way, not just attractive in a general way. The difference shows up in how she feels around you over time. Desire spikes and crashes. Recognition compounds. The man who only wants her becomes one of many men who only wanted her. The man who actually sees her becomes the one she can't replicate anywhere else, because nobody else is paying that kind of attention. Have a life she wants to be part of. If she stepped into your week tomorrow, would there be anything worth stepping into? Be honest with yourself for a moment. You have plans, whether she's in them or not, a Saturday morning thing, a Sunday hike with friends, a project you're working on after work. You have friendships she hasn't met yet, people who matter to you outside of her. You have something you're building, something that doesn't depend on her input or her presence to keep moving. This is the part nobody wants to hear because it can't be faked in 2 weeks. Women rarely choose men they have to build from scratch. They choose men whose lives are already in motion because that motion signals something fundamental, that you can sustain yourself, that you have direction, that being with you means joining something rather than constructing something from nothing. When your whole world reorganizes the second she shows up, that doesn't feel like devotion to her. It feels like pressure. It feels like she's now responsible for being your social calendar, your weekend, your purpose. That's a heavy thing to hand someone you just started dating. The man with momentum is the man whose life she wants to merge with, not rescue. So before you ask why she's not choosing you, ask whether the life you're offering her is one anyone would choose to be in. Be hard to read, easy to trust. Can she predict your values without predicting your every move? Most men get this exactly inverted. They make their behavior totally predictable while leaving their character completely vague. She doesn't always know when you'll text back, but she always knows that when you said you'd be somewhere, you'll be there. She can't game your reactions, but she knows your principles. She can't perfectly forecast your mood on a Tuesday, but she knows what you stand for. There's research suggesting that some uncertainty actually increases romantic interest. Verify a study by Whitchurch, Wilson, and Gilbert around 2011 found that women felt more attracted to men whose feelings were ambiguous than to men whose feelings were obviously high. But this gets misread constantly. The takeaway isn't to play games or send mixed signals. The takeaway is that predictability of behavior kills tension, while predictability of character builds trust, and you need one without losing the other. The man who texts on schedule, mirrors her every move, and arranges his calendar around hers becomes a known quantity in the boring sense. The man who has his own rhythm but lives by clear values becomes intriguing in the way that lasts. She's not wondering if you're reliable, she's wondering what you'll say next. That's the gap that keeps her engaged for years instead of weeks. Hold frame without hardening. When she pushes back on you, do you cave, do you attack, or do you simply stay? This is the one that separates men from each other the fastest, and most never figure it out. She tests a small boundary, and you hold it without getting cold about it. She gets sharp with you on a bad day, and you don't match the energy or escalate. She challenges your opinion in front of friends, and you don't fold to keep the peace, but you also don't get defensive and turn it into a fight. Frame is the unspoken question underneath every interaction who's leading the emotional weather right now. Men who can hold it without going rigid become rare, because most guys default to one of two failures. They either collapse, agreeing with whatever she said, just to end the discomfort, which makes them feel small to her later, or they harden, getting cold and distant, as a way of asserting themselves, which makes them feel unsafe. Holding frame is the third option, staying where you are, warmly, even when there's pressure to move. You might be thinking, isn't this just being stubborn? It's not. Because stubbornness is about being right. Frame is about being settled. You can hold your position while still being open to her perspective. The goal isn't winning. The goal is not getting blown around by every gust of pressure. Women feel that stability before they can articulate it. Be generous, without becoming currency. When you do something kind for her, do you quietly wait to see if it bought you something? This is the trap that catches more men than any other, and most don't even notice they're in it. You help her move on a Saturday, and 3 weeks later, you bring it up when you want her to do something for you. You pick up the bill, but there's a small performance in it, a slight pause where you wait for the acknowledgement. You give her your time, your energy, your effort, and somewhere in the back of your mind, you're tracking it like an invoice that hasn't been paid yet. That's transactional generosity, and women feel it instantly, even when they can't name what they're feeling. It registers as debt collection in slow motion. It makes them tense around you, because every kindness becomes a thing they owe back. Real generosity has no balance sheet. You do the thing because you wanted to do the thing. You give because giving felt right in the moment, not because you were placing a bet on the future. The difference is the energy underneath it, abundance versus calculation. The generous man with no scoreboard feels like a place she can rest. The generous man with a scoreboard feels like a relationship that's quietly becoming a job. She'll choose the first one almost every time, even if she can't tell you exactly why. Know what you'd walk away from. Does she sense that you have a line, even if you've never had to name it out loud? This is one of the most underrated forms of attractiveness, and it has nothing to do with ultimatums. You don't tolerate disrespect of your closest friends, even when she's frustrated with one of them. You don't laugh along when she's punching down on someone who isn't there to defend themselves. You have things you simply will not do, convictions she can sense without you having to lecture about them. A man with no walkaway point is a man with no shape. He bends in every direction the wind blows, and women feel the lack of structure even when they can't articulate it. There's a difference between being flexible and being formless, and most guys don't know where that line is. The man with internal standards isn't loud about them. He doesn't need to perform his principles or list his deal breakers on the second date. They show up in small moments: what he laughs at, what he doesn't laugh at, what he leaves the room for. Women are watching for this constantly, often without meaning to. They want to know if you're a partner or a placeholder, someone with edges, or someone who'll dissolve into whoever they need you to be. Having a walkaway doesn't mean you're threatening to leave. It means you've decided you're a whole person with or without the relationship. Run the 48-hour test. When was the last time you stepped back and let her come toward you? Not as a manipulation, not as a tactic, as an honest experiment. Here's what to try. For the next 48 hours, you don't initiate contact. If she reaches out, you respond warmly. You stay engaged. You don't punish her with distance, but you don't text first. You don't suggest plans. You don't fill the silence. You watch what happens, and more importantly, you watch what you feel while it's happening. There are two possible outcomes, and both of them are useful. The first is that she leans in. She reaches out, asks how your day's going, suggests something. That tells you the dynamic between you is more mutual than you may have feared, and you can stop carrying the entire weight of the connection alone. The second outcome is that nothing happens. The 48 hours pass, and you hear nothing, and now you have real information instead of hopeful theories. You've been doing the work for both of you, and she's been letting you. Neither answer is bad. Both answers tell you exactly what you needed to know to decide what to do next. The reason this matters is because most men never run this test, and they spend years guessing about something they could have found out in 2 days. You don't need her to choose you in theory. You need to know what's actually there. Become someone she doesn't want to lose. If you disappeared from her life next week, what specifically would she miss? Not in general, specifically. This is the cumulative effect of everything else on this list, and it's the only one that actually answers the question the video started with. You're the one who makes her laugh in a particular way no one else does. You're the one she thinks about telling first when something good happens at work. You've become woven into the texture of her daily life, not by colonizing her schedule, but by being a presence that improved the days you were in. Choice isn't a single dramatic moment. It's an accumulation. Research from John Gottman on long-term partnerships, Verify Gottman, and Levinson's longitudinal work on marriage points to something called positive sentiment. Override the idea that lasting bonds built on a steady accumulation of small positive moments that eventually outweigh the inevitable friction. Women don't choose the man who made the grandest single gesture. They choose the man whose presence made their ordinary life better in ways they noticed slowly and then couldn't unnotice. So here's a small thing to sit with. What's the specific thing only you bring? Not the things you have in common with every other man who's ever liked her. The thing that's actually yours. Because the answer to that question is the answer to whether she chooses you, and if you don't know it, neither does she. So you've spent this whole video looking at what she should be feeling, what she should be noticing, what she should eventually choose, but every signal we just went through, you were also showing yourself. The calm presence, the lack of competing, the specific noticing, the life worth joining, the held frame, the generosity without a scoreboard, the walkaway you can sense. Those aren't just things she sees in you. They're things you've been quietly evaluating in yourself for the last 20-something minutes. Of these 10, which one are you already doing without realizing it? And which one have you been avoiding because it asks something harder of you? Tell us in the comments which item hit closest to home, the one you recognized, or the one you've been quietly dodging. Hit like if you're still thinking about it, and subscribe so you don't miss what's next.